Hi and welcome to the Venture Builder podcast, where you can hear interviews with entrepreneurs, founders, investors, and other players in the entrepreneurial and startup ecosystem. Today our guest is Charles, who is the co-founder, team owner, and team manager of the mobile esports team Kicks. Charles manages a culturally diverse team of young talents across 6 countries and will share his personal experience in scouting and cultivating Gen Z talents in a highly competitive environment. So Charles, thank you for your time today, and let's get right into it. You currently run several esports teams in the mobile gaming space. How did you begin your journey in this space, and how did you go about building your first team?
Hi, Wing. Thank you very much for receiving me. I appreciate the opportunity. So my name is Charles. I'm 30 years old, and I'm currently running 2 esports teams for the games Clash Royale and Brawl Stars. And we're also organizing tournaments. We've built a dedicated platform to that. I will mention it a little bit, but I'll focus on the team side today. So let me go back on our journey. That was a little bit unusual, I think. So first, we started out of Macau, which is an important component. And I joined my partners. It was in 2016. They were working in traditional advertising here, and we're looking at new digital, more digital projects. And we heard about esports back in the days, and we wanted to see, okay, what can we do in esports in Macau? So it started like that. So very like a blank canvas. And our first project was a university tournament. So we partnered with the University of Macau to organize a competition with 2 games, and we decided to do it with League of Legends and Clash Royale. And the reason we picked Clash Royale was because I was looking at games that were popular in Macau, as well as in the region, and we found that game was kind of popular here and also growing in the world. And I could see started to have some kind of professional event for it. It was the very, very beginning, but I was like, okay, that's interesting. I find it worth to get involved. And by organizing that physical offline tournament at the university, that gave us actually our first experience. But I also understood at the same time that if I wanted to make it a business in Macau, if I wanted to get into the business of esports, Macau is going to be too small. So very quickly from that realization, I started to see, okay, what can I do to reach gamers in Asia and in the world? So I set up at the time a very simple website to organize online competition. And then a few months after, we started to grow a small community of like a few hundred to 1,000 players of that game, Clash Royale. And at some point, we add in our competition some high-profile players, some professional players, and some of the other players, like unknown players, were actually able to beat them. So from that, we were like, okay, that's interesting. Let's talk with these guys and see who they are, what they're doing. So we started a conversation with them, and we realized that they were not part of any esports structure, or they were just like playing on their own. So from that, we're like, okay, maybe that's an opportunity to start our own team, and that team can be kind of a vehicle to promote the esports tournament platform. So just as simple as that. And after a few months with that new team, we just hired, I think, 2 players at the very beginning. We saw that there was the opportunity to enter the Clash Royale League, which would be the official professional tournament for that game. So kind of like the NBA of that game. And we managed to get a spot, and we started in 2018 with our first professional team, and now it's been 3 years.
Right. That's really interesting, because the way you started it was a kind of commercial or business approach where you looked at the market and the game, and then you kind of just decided, I guess, let's do something about it. And this is where the offline tournament started with the university. And then you decided to make it into more like a tech product, bringing it online. And then through that is where actually you sourced the talents that that you began with for your first team, essentially. Would that be like the right way to summarize the flow of how you went about it?
Exactly. It was a very step-by-step approach and very natural and very
That's,
interesting process.
that's interesting because I know most people would think if, oh, you're starting an esports team, it's probably, you look at the league, there's a certain element, the prize money, and then you just go about trying to find, good players for the game. So obviously your approach is quite interesting. And now that you mentioned the tournament side of things, is still an ongoing project. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. You mean the tournament platform, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So from that very basic website, that was like kind of a event registration website, I would say. We moved on to a more interesting project now. So the platform is called Loot, and it's actually incubated in a cyberport in Hong Kong. And we moved to I would say a model where now that platform is not only for us to organize tournament, it's also for other people to organize their leagues and tournaments automatically, which means that we can now actually integrate with those games to generate the matches inside the game and make the process much easier. Because we realized actually by doing those tournaments that there was a lot of pain points in the online infrastructures of the esports tournament. So that's it's a whole different project compared to the pro team, but I'm very passionate about it.
Right. No, it sounds very exciting. Looking back, would you have done it differently? I mean, there's obviously different ways to start a team, and you decided to pursue a tournament and gathering all these grassroots talents, and then going from there. Would you have done it differently now, looking back?
That's a very interesting question, actually. Okay, in terms of how it started and the creation of the team, I think that was perfect because we didn't have any experience in running any team before, and we didn't have any legitimacy, I would say, in the space. So let's say if I just arrive and even let's say I have money and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to start a team, that helps, but that is not necessarily going to help you to get the best talents and everything. So if I could do some things differently, actually, I'm going to share. I made tons of mistakes in running the team. And of course, now I can step back and say, okay, I can do this or that better. And I'm going to give you a few elements in a second. But in terms of how we started it, I think that was very natural and that was perfect. When we started almost 3 years ago now, there was not a lot of experienced coach in the industry, especially in Asia, because the game was born in 2016. The Pro League started in 2018. So there was not a lot of I would say talents on the coaching side. So what we did is basically we assembled players and we kind of gave them we kind of asked them to play, but also to coach, to be their own coach and make the strategic decisions. So I was more on the management side, on the operation. I love to play, but I'm not good enough to be a coach. So I could not handle that position, that's for sure. And that's for me the biggest mistake that I've made, and one of the most important things for me right now in the team is the coach. So I would advise anyone, do not overlook that. Building an esports team is not just like gathering players and let them play. So having a good coach would be my priority in hiring when I hire the teams, the talents. Then we hired a bit too much. We hired too many players. So for this, what my advice would be: don't hire too many players, because although you're going to think that it's going to give you flexibility, And I think that's what we are looking for at the beginning, because we didn't know exactly how to expect, and we wanted to, okay, we're gonna have all these different players. We can build interesting strategies and surprise our opponents. But while that could work, usually what's gonna happen is maybe one or two players are not gonna play that much. And when you have all these players living together in a gaming house, and at some point like one or two are not, they're not necessarily playing on stage and contributing that much to the team. I mean, at least publicly, that can lead to a bit of frustrations and maybe hard times in the team. So that was one of the mistakes. Also, it adds a bit of pressure on your cash flow, which is also something I would advise to be careful with. So better less, but better players.
You mean you touched on a couple of issues there. I think chemistry you mentioned, and just the strategies, etc. I mean, to look at it another way, I think it gets overlooked sometimes that people think of esports as a group of kids, playing video games. I think what gets overlooked is that these are a group of kids who exceeded 99.99% of the other people who play and elevated to the top to a very kind of elite and competitive stage. So it's a little bit more, or it's a lot more than just having fast reflexes or being young or playing the game a lot. So would you be able to kind of expand on that and say how do you scout kind of talent? Because I know for kicks you scout talents from all around the world. You have Indonesian players, you have a guy from Egypt who's pretty amazing. So how do you what do you look at when you look at these talents and understanding how they're going to become a very effective individual for your team?
Okay, so for the talent scouting, actually, it goes back to what I was saying in the last question. Mm-hmm. It's something that I will leave now to the coaches. I really trust them 100%. Of course, we'll still discuss it, and they always tell me, okay, we're looking at these players, that players. As a team manager and owner, I will weigh in sometimes also the popularity of these two players. So let's say if you have two players of equivalent level, but one has like a tremendous reach on social media and things like that, that will weigh in. But otherwise, now, so one of the mistakes I've made in the past is, since we didn't really have that formal coach, it was the players who would, the player coach who would check the talents and recruit. We were organizing tryouts, things like that. But now, ultimately, we leave that decision to the coach.
Right.
He's going to be the one responsible of scouting the talents and make the final decision. So how do we do that? There are several ways. I have actually three ways in mind how we usually do that. The first one is going to be, naturally, you're going to take a look at the talents already in the league. So what's going to happen is every year there are going to be some movements. Some players, some teams might actually exit the league, and that could free some talent. So that's usually an interesting opportunity. Or some teams are going to let go of some talents. So what we have been doing, especially with our international players, is we are playing in the Clash Royale League East, but there's also a Clash Royale League West,
Yep.
And so what happened is, some talents in the West that were still pretty good didn't manage to find a team. I think one of the reasons is that the talent pool in the West is bigger compared to the number of teams. So some talents are going to be left out, and that's usually a good opportunity to get some really, really good international, kind of overlooked international talents. So that's what we did for the international ones. Otherwise, we're going to look in most of the games that's not only for Clash Royale. There is kind of an ongoing in-game tournament, if we can say. It's called the ladder, the rankings, the global rankings. This is a very public information. You can see the top performers globally in the game, and usually those top performers are, you're going to be able to find them on social media, because they start to be public profile. Even some of them can be, streamers, content creators. So it's usually easy to engage with them, and find them and discuss. The other one is gonna be, I think the last one is gonna be third-party tournaments, like the things that we organize on our Loot platform.
Mm-hmm.
So the coach is also gonna check all the emerging talents in those third-party competitions. So yeah, that gives you kind of three directions on how to find talents. And one thing that we do, we make a selection of a few like diverse profile, and we do some what we call tryouts, which is going to be basically a private online tournament that we set up with all the new talents we're interested in and the existing players of the team. We still test them because it's something I could develop later on, but in esports, the level of players can actually change quite fast from a season to another. So a player that has been really, really good 1 year ago could be actually, unfortunately, could not be at the same level today. So it's something that you always need to double check.
Right, because the meta changes and the game dynamics changes from period to period, which is an interesting concept, which I wanted to ask you maybe the question after. But you mentioned right at the start, you leave the hiring decision to the coaches. So can you give me a little bit more insight into how you would discover, a good coach that works for your team? And then as an extension of that, can you give us a little bit of an idea of how you structure the training regimens and the schedules through the season and in the off season, and obviously now that the team is in the playoffs, like how that would evolve through the different phases?
Okay, I'm gonna share my personal experience on how I found the coach. I think there's definitely several ways, and now more and more the coaches are public figures, so you can also approach them or recruit some coaches from other team. But for us, it was very interesting. It was last year in 2019. I hired a former professional French player that was competing in the Clash Royale League West before, to be the manager and coach of the team for a season. And so he started in season 1 of 2019. There are 2 seasons per year. And at the end of that season, he shared with me that he really needed some backup on the coaching side. It was hard for him to organize all the training, manage some of the team operations, and manage the players themselves. And he shared with me that he had a really, really good coach that he worked with before. It was in a smaller league. It was not in the professional league, but he told me it was the best coach he has ever had, and he was really good with players. Like you, as a human being, he was really skilled at managing people, and he had a very good knowledge of the game. So I was like, okay, that guy did actually a really, really good job. He, although he's younger than me, but he taught me a lot about the esports, how to manage a team, and the esports world in general. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna follow your advice. Let's get that guy. And that coach actually is studying in sports, so real coaching. So I think that's a very rare thing in esports yet, and a very interesting thing, because once again, coaching is not only about knowing the game. You need to know how to motivate and handle those talents, especially young players. I found that this is a very, very difficult task, and we're still working on it nowadays. So as I said, the difficulty in esports is that for a game like Clash Royale, the game was born in 2016. Competition scene was born late 2017, 2018. So you don't have necessarily like people with years of experience. But at least if you get a guy that has been involved with teams for a while, that got good results in those competitions, and that can be, that that can be referred by other players, or I think that's a good that was a good sign. So we tried it, and yeah, I mean, it was day and night difference in the approach compared to what we had before. In terms of training regimen, I will describe what we usually have before COVID and how we do now with COVID. So before, usually we would gather all the players in a gaming house. So that was also a requirement of the league. Last year it was in Korea. This year it's in China. So usually we have a gaming house there. And players would train 6 to 8 hours a day. I usually start training around 10 a.m. Those 6 to 8 hours a day is not like pure gameplay. It's gonna include some strategic discussions. We also try to pay attention to their lifestyle. So by this I mean, it was especially easier when we live all together. But what time they go to bed, what time they wake up. We also push them to go out of the house every day. We also push them to do a bit of sport. So we try to schedule some sports sessions at least twice a week. And then they will also watch the competition, other competition, to see what other people are playing, to see the strategy. So although the coach is going to define the strategy, we also want the input of the players, and it's something that we like them to do. And finally, to go a little bit more in details in the training, what we're going to do is they're going to train together, but we also organize what we call scrims, so friendly matches with other teams. Usually what we do is we pick other top teams in the West division, so that we don't really play with the opponents we're going to face in the league naturally. And that is also important, to have a coach that is well connected with the community in general, and with the other coaches and other good players. Because what we are going to do is those scrims with other teams. So we're going to replicate kind of a match structure that we do in the league. But also sometimes we're going to do more targeted trainings. So let's say because we are going to have players dedicated to the 1v1 mode and some to the 2v2 mode. And let's say we want to do a more targeted training with one of our player playing the 1v1. And we know that this guy in the West kind of have a similar style as that guy that we're going to face next week. So we're going to try to find, this type of matchups to do some like real real situation training, I must say. So just without getting too much into the details, that's what we do.